Good afternoon. So for those who don't know me, I'm Florian Martin-Bariteau, that was kindly introduced earlier by my friend and colleague, as we say in French, ami mais néanmoins collègue, Amélie Favreau. Thank you again, Amélie and Thierry, for the invitation to chair this session this afternoon. So I'm a professor of law at the University of Ottawa in Canada, and so I've been working for a few years now, not really with Tina and with others, like with Karl, also from Sherbrooke, on some issues of like quantum governance, quantum policy, and I will share like some of the experiences or also like some of the pitfalls and some of the successes that we had in Canada. And so for this session, I'm joined by Pieter first, and to do like the proper introduction because Amélie just delegated this to me. So Professor Vermaas is, as you know by now, is a philosopher of quantum technology and design at the Technical University of Delft, where he leads ethics research for the Dutch Quantum Delta Netherlands program for the development of quantum technologies, and he heads the Quantum Governance and Value Labs at the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management at TU Delft. And also with us this afternoon, we have our local Anna, so Dr. Anna Minguzzi, who is Directrice de Recherche CNRS, CNRS Research Director at LPMMC, the Laboratoire de Physique et Modélisation des Milieux Condensés in Grenoble that she used to lead. And now she's also the director of QuantAlps, so the research federation that bridging together 200 plus quantum science researchers and faculty spread over like 19 laboratories and research federation around like the Grenoble area, and who has been like leading. We'll come back to this in a few seconds on like how to make sure that like the social sciences are like integrated in this federation and investing in this and having quite like a leadership role, I would say, at least on the French stage in the matter. And last but not the least, I'm so joined by Christopher Coenen, who is the political scientist and researcher at the Institute for Technology Assessment and System Analysis, ITAS, at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, where he leads the research group Life, Innovation, Health and Technology. He's also the editor-in-chief of Nanoethics, a journal that some of you might know, and is advising the German Bundestag, the European Parliament, and currently is leading a study on technology assessment of quantum technologies for the German government. So a few like leadership roles, like executive roles that Pieter was just mentioning at the end of this presentation. So I think that would also be great to hear from you, Christopher, on that perspective and what we can bring to the table. So this afternoon it's kind of like a conversation, and it's an actual conversation. I have like a few themes that my co-panelists want to talk about. I'm gonna also reflect on what Pieter just said, but yeah, there is no like proper presentations, and feel free to ask questions at any time. Just raise your hand. I'm gonna try to like look at both the panelists and the room. So yeah, you don't have to wait, at the end, especially because I think we might just be carried away by the conversation. So just shoot your questions as soon as you think about them. And so based on like the kind of short conversation we had before and Pieter's keynote, I was thinking of like splitting our conversation in kind of like two themes. A first one around like, the strategic leadership for interdisciplinarity in research and what we need, and like in Canada and North America we also call this like transdisciplinarity. And a second theme is also around like multi-stakeholderism and the geopolitics of it. There is, in the past 12 months, so many things has been happening like at the national, domestic, regional, and international level. A lot is being discussed within G7 at the moment, within ITU for like internet governance that may also have some impact for like the quantum internet, etc. So that's kind of like the two broad areas. And so first, the need for interdisciplinarity. As you were mentioning, Pieter, in your presentation, so for the longest time and still like in many countries and in many centers, it's very like, quantum research is very much like a STEM, like kind of restricted area. So you have a lot of physics, but I would say chemistry, maths. Like at Ottawa, we have a lot of mathematicians for both like PQC and QKD, but also like engineering. And more we've seen like, coming to the table, and we know that we need people from humanities, for people with expertise in the economics, with competition issues, ecosystem issues, management, geopolitics, policy, etc. And so Grenoble here has been like leading Delft, even though you mentioned you're like the last shell, at least you're one of them, and also you're the one like enveloping everything, so there is a bit of hope. Ottawa, Sherbrooke also have been like leading this in Canada. So integrating like HSS, so Humanities and Social Sciences in the centers, in the strategy. And so maybe I would like to, because we have someone who is leading one of those, big quantum institutes, so Quantalp, Anna, at Grenoble, and you have been like investing in this, making like some strategic decision to allocate budget that you could have been allocating to other things. I've been, I've benefited from this because Quantalp has budget for like invite scientists, and it's not like, a huge budget, because we all know that French universities, as we've seen in the past weeks, are like underfunded. And Anna and the team at Quantalp decided to allocate one of those positions for a law professor, namely me, to come and live in Grenoble last fall to like work with Amélie and the team here. So maybe Anna, if you could like tell us a bit, why Quantalp, and you as director, you decided to like go in this direction.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Florian, for the nice introduction. And yes, indeed. So myself, I am a physicist. But when we were building Quantalps, first of all, I was not alone. We started thinking about this together with Alexa Ofev, that is now in Singapore. And at the time, we were already imagining that we were searching for something that is very interdisciplinary. I think this is something crucial. And secondly, in fact, we start more and more to realize, and now it's clear, I think, to everybody, that quantum sciences are ready for discussion with humanities since quite a long time. And from the perspective of a scientist like me, but your invitation was in fact a decision of the whole governing board of Quantalps. Some of the people are in the audience, so I may say that it was not only my decision.
No, the federation.
We have a board, and we ask for applications, and then your application was reviewed by the board and was accepted by many people. So what we have in mind is that, well, first of all, quantum sciences is not only physics, it's also, for example, computer science and mathematics, both fundamental and applied, and as well as these social and human sciences, where what do we learn from you? We learn, first of all, about methods. So one thing that we learn is how to analyze the world around us, how to communicate. So I must say that as physicists, we are more specialized in experiments or calculations, but we are not used so much on communicating part. So this is very interesting. And also the methods that have been developed through the Innovax Federation, which turned out so successful, were really new to us. So all these techniques to involve the people in the large public, or also the idea of having people together discussing also what we learned from Thierry is a way to analyze a problem from the ethical point of view. Some things that if you're not formed on that, you may lose a lot of time just to define well the question, while what we learned is the way how to formulate the problem is half of the solution. And we are used to do that for an equation, but much less for a more complex ecosystem as it is the one which is of quantum sciences and technologies. So that was one of the main reasons why we actually thought it's so important to have you on board. And it was a real pleasure to discover more and more. And I may also add, if I may, if I can take some more minutes, is that this intersection turned out to be really, really pleasant and fruitful for us, for the scientists, because it's a way to open our scenario. So when we had the Tuesday for Quantum Sciences, we had many researchers participating that they just liked the fact of learning about a new topic. That was very, we like to be educated on something new that has some relation to what we do, but it gives us a broader perspective. So this is something really rich and enriching, and we saw so many researchers, not even researchers working on quantum, but just physicists that liked to attend to the Tuesdays for Quantum because they liked to learn new things. So this is something beautiful that happened. And then, of course, all that we did together, all that is in this room, you can see these results of the many weeks which were spent together in the TIQuA project. It was really enriching. And now I also believe that all that is written and the way it's presented is also useful for the large public. So not only for us, not only as a research subject in itself, from the point of view of human and social sciences, but it's also our way to approach to the society. Since we start to try to explain to you, human and social scientists, what is quantum, which is trying to avoid equations and definitions, it's the first step. Then you teach us how to speak to somebody else that is outside. So it is also really, really useful for that, and I think we should really continue.
Okay, thank you. And I will not take it personally as a lawyer. Yeah, especially in law, we love to talk. And often, like colleagues in STEM are like, "Oh, you know how to talk. You can talk for hours." I'm like, "Yeah, sometimes that can be an issue." But I think like that kind of knowledge exchange, between like disciplines is essential. So, like as you mentioned, like so it could be very like useful and fruitful for you, but also for us to learn, about the quantum literacy, both for like social sciences, but also for the public is essential to understand. And this is having those kind of conversations together in the room, not like working in silos. That can be very like helpful to design policy, to think about the governance of this. And so maybe Christopher or Pieter, if you could reflect like within your own institutional experience working like across the field, is it like always easy, more complex? Did you see like an evolution over the years as we've been maybe talking more and more about quantum in the general society? Or Christopher?
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, there are differences So I'm working technology assessment. So our institution is already strongly interdisciplinary. So our director is a physicist who became a philosopher. others are engineers, others are philosophers. I'm a political scientist. Some people combine biology and sociology, or physics and philosophy, and therefore this area, usually I don't do that, but I think it's quite an advantage that we have this field so strong, and our institute, ITAS, is I think one of the strongest in the world in this, because we have sometimes for the natural science engineering colleagues, we have something what in German we call it the smell of the barn. So we are part of their community. So for example, in my team, the two younger, very active colleagues, Seki Seske has been mentioned, and Adrian Schmidt, they're both from physics, and so but work in our area. So I think this is a very nice institutional configuration. And in the meantime, I would say within KIT, our institute, we are often now approached by natural scientist engineers. When we come to quantum specifically, I find it very interesting that not only in our KIT experience, but much more broadly, one of the things where this kind of, how do you say, disciplinary distance and feeling a little bit alien, or the others doing something different, is often solved with inclusion of the arts. What you are doing, as I understood here also, I took some pictures and everything. So I think this is an approach where I think easily all of us academics can work together, because all of us at least believe we are cultured persons, and therefore like the arts. And so I think that's a good thing. And also I think the arts in this specific context are interesting, because I think the notion of beauty is also something that even in mathematics, etc., people can relate to, a beautiful solution, etc. So I think this is one thing of bringing, in a transdisciplinary fashion, people together. The other thing is the specificities of physics. So I think it was Rutherford, if I remember, he said, in the world of science, there is physics and the rest is stamp collecting. So everything is stamp collecting. So this is chemistry as well as political science, as philosophy, etc. On the other hand, of course, and that would be my last point here, is as soon as you come from science to applied science to technology to engineering, you're part of something where it might be stamp collecting, yes, but it has regularities, and there, of course, then the social scientists become experts, etc. If we have value questions in politics, philosophers, etc., are experts. And I think that is something that everyone in this community realizes. And I like to talk about myself sometimes, but only if it's helpful for the context. So in 2011, I was in a workshop in a monastery in Austria, and Karlsruhe was, I think, the scientific committee. And back then, these were all quantum researchers, and back then they were really nervous about getting involved in anything. They were just like almost paranoid, like no science fiction that will frighten the public or something. In the meantime, the colleagues there have totally understood how important the field has become, and that they cannot really now try to hide for the public. And there's no reason, in my point of view, to hide for the public, because I don't see, besides some conspirational concerns in the public, I don't see any backlash against that. And the questions that you have raised are important, like geopolitics, etc., etc. But there are, I think, not value questions coming from the material basis of the research, but the application and the consequences geopolitically. So specificities with physics, in the beginning a kind of distance, but in the meantime I think they as you say, they would welcome broadening their view and getting more expertise, as you said, in the messy social issues. But maybe it's too positive, optimistic.
Yeah, so my experience in Quantum Delta is that it started with the same motives you put on the table. And so let's have the social scientists in for outreach to explain to the others, the non-physicists, what quantum is about, because the physicists have difficulties doing that, and what's even worse, the others have difficulty understanding it because they're not physicists. So that's where you have the social scientists coming in. And then you have this more modern insight in innovation, is that you stop with that linear view that you develop a technology and then start to talk with a market. Now get the society immediately into the development, and that you can incorporate society in your development of your technologies. That's fine. That was also what in Quantum Delta was one. My experience is that they need us much more. I've been called in at different moments, not alone only the international politics that say, hey, yeah, we have to talk. UNESCO wants something with us. What shall we do? OECD, who goes to OECD to say something about quantum? Well, not the physicists. Let's use some of these. More seriously, when the inclusivity topic hit the fan, so the sorry position of women, female students in this male-dominated group, then I was called in. So how can we change that? How can we change that? And the same with defense. Now, my Delft is kind of split, or the physicists are split about those who accept funding from defense and others who don't. And they're all confronted with the fact that they can't anymore collaborate with their long-established relationship in China and Pakistan or whatever. They don't like it, and we are called in. I don't know whether that's the same here in Grenoble, that much more comes to your plate. So it's not designed up front. I see that we are needed on multiple dimensions.
You want to maybe?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so I think that overall, so maybe we should exploit you even more. But in fact, yes, right now, social and human sciences are a part of our quantum ecosystem. So it's not the outer shell of the onion. For us, it's one of the research axes. So you have been completely integrated, yes, at the same level as all the other branches. And also, what was new in our federation was that at the same time, the physicists opened also to other disciplines, which was already a step, like computer scientists were as well new as the human and social sciences. So yeah, about your role, it's really useful to know all that you can do, because exactly what happens in interdisciplinarity is that we have a huge potential that we don't know. So the more and more we talk together, and the more and more we find out who is the right person for which event or which situation, and so on. Yes, so I fully agree. And
Perfect. Thank you so much. And actually, it made me like remember my first meeting, and I was like, oh, usually I think I was the one, like, you know, at first going to the scientists, to talking and meeting them, like, because I lead a big center on tech policy at Ottawa. I meet, like, you know, directors of other centers often on campus, and we started to talk about this. But actually, my first kind of quantum policy moment was people from quantum who called me for a meeting with the head of the National Cybersecurity Agency of Canada. So before the pandemic, you know, like, I was doing a lot of NatSec and cybersecurity work, like, and you have like, yeah, I read a bit about the issue with quantum encryption, like, yeah, come to the meeting. It would be good for us to have a law professor in the room. And we got the people from criminology and from, like, you know, the encryption from QKD, like PQC, and, you know, Michele Mosca was also in the room and stuff. But I was like, yeah, we need a law professor. That would be good. So please come. But anywho, so no, that's super interesting. And so we need that kind of like exchange, as you all mentioned, like across disciplines, really like in an integrated fashion, not like silos. Also sometimes to discover things. And I think, like, not again to promote TIQuA, but because also it's the final session. Like, you know, last fall I was here for one of the session when we had like technical presentations, but for like the general public. And I think they wanted to convey a specific message with one of those presentations, and then I came to one of them at the end. I was like, it's super interesting, but like, what about this and that, and what about like the privacy of people, and maybe this being used as a tool of like surveillance because of the way that technology would work, and I'm like, yeah, maybe something we need to think of. I'm like, yeah, you need to embed those kind of conversation at the design stage and not just, like at the application. But so that's why we need to talk like across disciplines, but also beyond the disciplines, beyond academia. We need to talk with like other stakeholders, like with industry. And I know like even within academia, sometimes there is, and you mentioned this, Pieter, the kind of division between like fundamental research and like applied research. And sometimes people in fundamental research look a bit down to like the applied one, etc. And then you have the link to industry. And in social sciences, people don't really like to go talk to like, industry, big tech, especially in the policy, because there is always like an issue of optics. And then there is like the need for international collaboration, because it's not just like one researcher in Grenoble or in Nice or in Delft or in Ottawa or Sherbrooke that's gonna like find the develop the best technology or develop the best safeguard for some of the risks presented by those technologies. And at the moment, this is one of the issues we're having, because for the past 12 months, many kind of like countries have been closing down the borders for like the knowledge sharing and information sharing between countries within the EU and between like the EU, US, Canada, etc. For those who, like, it's mostly leveraging import-exports rules, and so that's something I've been working a lot with Tina and also with people like in industry in Canada to make sense. And that's so Emily was mentioning some of the G7 work, and so as part of like the policy engagements groups for the G7 that is led by Canada this year, we made some proposal, but so far they end up like on the table of the Sherpas of G7. So it's kind of like the last stage for maybe having a G7 position on this, finger crossed. But yeah, so maybe I would like to hear you about this, like the need for like those kind of multi-stakeholder engagement. Maybe I will start with you, Pieter, like with industry, with governments, parliament, but also like, internationally. What does it look like? You mentioned some of the geopolitical issues in your keynote, and in my introduction, I was also, like, for those who don't know, but like telco, governance, and policy internationally, it's heavily regulated, and there's been for years a lot of cooperation and multi-stakeholder engagement, notably to govern the internet. Everything is being renegotiated as we speak, and there is some issues with non-like-minded countries, and one of the big questions is the US one of them or not, on how we want to govern those kind of technologies, and also like AI and quantum and stuff.
Actually, I kind of like it that they shut down their borders, that they and that some countries, I think Spain is an example, that they start exploring how to retain their technology within their national borders. I like it because it's an experiment of what is coming. And so we operated so far in a kind of global economic sphere where technology is developed together, and where companies can buy each other, so knowledge can be bought by just buying the startups, and that was a business model. We now know, as part of that sovereignty development, that has elements which we don't like. Everything is being bought eventually by big tech. So all the knowledge which is developed here, also in Grenoble, ends up in Ottawa maybe, or in Seattle. We don't like that. We think for other reasons that it should have a different model, that it should stay here, that it should be dispersed. And so we have to explore how to do that. And maybe the first exploration was not good. We don't like it, but yeah, that's physics. The first model of a phenomenon is wrong, but that's the first one, and then next comes. So I'm very much interested in seeing how Europe would solve that issue, that they want to close down the the global market of knowledge and make it more Europe directed. I'm also interested in how our other values are then still maintained, namely international solidarity. If we are really good in shutting down our knowledge or confining our knowledge to Europe, that means that lots of other countries will never have that knowledge. So that's, yeah, I'm not too critical about that countries start not collaborating with each other.
Just sorry, I did not want to interrupt you. I wanted to say that from the scientist's point of view, maybe by making a clear distinction between technology and science, we should try to keep the science totally open. This is something like the scientific diplomacy is one of our highest values. It worked during many dark periods of the past century, and I think we were grown with this ideal, and I am sure that many scientists in the audience share this point of view. So maybe one solution would be to split the two and to put somewhere a limit between science and technology and say that science should be absolutely open to everybody. Well, technology, well, this I let you guys decide.
Okay, this is really interesting point. Yeah. So if this is possible to some extent, this sounds really nice. It's of course I don't know if this makes sense in English. Idealistic to some extent, but I'm very much with that. So given in these geopolitical developments, which is not only limited to quantum, but quantum tech is clearly something which is at the focus, also in China and other countries in this context. I like to look back to the Royal Society of London document where it says we are scientists, we don't meddle with metaphysics, politics, and a number of other things. So basically the contract was you leave us, we don't mix, we do not do politics, and then for this, if we don't do that, leave us alone and let us have our republic of letters, let us cooperate as we like or something. I fully understand, and in particular in dual-use technologies, I'm also in favor of being cautious in terms of dissemination or proliferation of stuff. But if there could be, in particular, initiative coming out of the natural sciences and saying, okay, here's our curiosity-driven, or maybe idealistically speaking, we increase the knowledge of humankind thing, and we make sure that this is nothing which can be used for bad purposes. Leave us alone, and we do this as openly as possible. Also, without being an expert on that, I would imagine the more open you do it, the less probable it is that in a geopolitical game someone can get an advantage. So everyone is afraid that someone gets an advantage, and as I understand in this field, this can be an advantage which is quite crucial, if not decisive. So maybe this openness is also a kind of safeguard to some extent. So I really like this idea, and okay, I'll leave it with that.
No, but I think I kind of agree, and even with you, Pieter, but like to some part, because what you mentioned for me is more like an ecosystem issue, and I'm with you. We need to protect regional ecosystem and trying to not replicate what we've seen in other areas for platforms or for AI, and like Canada is like the best example. Canada has been leading on the AI research and development for years, but at some point like some of the brightest startups were like Canadian. Today they called Meta AI, Google DeepMind, because they all got Canada got bought up by the US and by big tech. And this is a conversion we're having at the moment, like, for the quantum ecosystem, where again, we have some of the leaders to the point that even though the US want to buy out Canada, like the US government is basically subcontracting to Canadian startups the development of like cryptographic tools, etc. But yeah, we need to make sure that that stays a Canadian ecosystem, and like for Europe, because there are also like some startups and like amazing stuff coming out of Europe, making sure that it stays European and it's not just bought out by like Microsoft, IBM, and the other big ones, because then you have an access issue, especially for the first one who will get like quantum advantage, and also you have like the global south, global north access issue. But at the same time, like we need to make sure that there is knowledge sharing that is possible within like the researchers, the scientists, the people like developing the technology, as Christopher mentioned, also like to develop the safeguards, because as we've seen at the moment, just for like the issue of encryption, what could become the issue with encryption, we're having like some solutions coming that are the result of a truly like global collaborative effort to develop this, with like French scientists being involved, Kenyan scientists being involved, working together, basically for the US. That's another issue with NIST. That's an agency of the US government. But still, like we need those kind of like global collaboration. So we need to be like super careful on how we design policies. And literally the way I've been able to engage, the best way for me to engage like quantum scientists in Canada has been to show them the initial French import-export regulation on quantum. They're like, what is this, Florian? Doesn't make any sense. I'm like, no, this is actually like the law in France, and it's coming our way in Canada. 3 months later, it was in Canada. So that's also why we need like, that kind of interdisciplinary collaboration and conversation to make sure that the kind of policies, it's not like just in 2050, it's actually like in 2025 that is being like developed, or like developed in a way that protects our strategic autonomy, while like allowing for those kind of collaboration. This is a teaser for tomorrow's workshop. But yeah, Pieter or Christopher, if you wanted to react on this.
Okay, yeah.
Or maybe the need to work with industry and like to build those bridges.
Let's go back to the general point of open science, open technology. I think your example of quantum encryption, so classical quantum encryption, the stuff which is there, the encryption methods which are now developed for NIST in order to secure communication against attacks by quantum computers, I think that would be an excellent example of a technology which should be shared immediately. It should not be the case that Europe has a wonderful post-quantum encryption system and Africa is kind of doomed because because they don't have it. I would say that in addition to that we should share our scientific knowledge, we should also share that technology. You could argue that you could do the same with quantum computing. If you make it publicly available, then no one has an advantage, and we have a couple of problems less. So I don't know yet what the best solution is. One solution might be to have export controls and knowledge security measures. Another one is to go straight the other side and say, okay, we're not going to make a market for this. We're going to make it public technology.
Yeah, interesting. So I don't know how it is in your country with this kind of Gaullist and other traditions or something like, but in Germany, not in quantum tech commissions, etc., but in circles that I'm currently involved with people close to government decision making, etc., etc. I'm really quite surprised. So the German West German tradition was always like the US is the big daddy or something, and so there's quite some insecurity at the moment and quite some highly politicized discussions in circles where you usually would never, perhaps only in the evening over dinner, talk politics. Now they're doing this in the midst of workshops, so like equidistance to US and China, even such discussions coming up, or de-risking and decoupling towards the US, etc. And this, to my extent, also to my, it's already my impression that this shows that we are just in such fluid times in terms of blocks, etc. That again, this would be an argument that within the scientific community globally, we keep in mind, so to say, very idealistically speaking, humankind's interest and push for every solution which makes us independent from the very fragile political situation that we have. So, because as a West German, I could already the storming of the capital or something is for me like, what's going on? So we have very little security, stability in the system, and so if the political system gets so rapidly totally irrational and obscurantist, science system or the scientific community globally needs to position itself as a force of reason and rationality and discourse and international discourse.
Yeah, no. I fully agree with you. Do we have questions? Yeah. Robert?
I can think of another ethical issue about closing borders at the level of technology, which is quite similar to the ethical issue why we don't want to close borders at the level of pure science. And that is, there are probably, I mean, it's clear that, let me make a stupid example. There's a certain scale at which a technology can only develop. So it's clear that if you live in a little village and you decide to build a car factory in your village, you won't have enough expertise and breadth of knowledge to have cars for everyone in the village. So clearly car manufacturing is something that has to happen at a certain scale, probably of a country or something. I suspect, and I think probably there are technologies which can only work if we have them at a global scale. Maybe quantum is one of them, and then that maybe poses an ethical question that either we put borders and no one has this good technology, if it is a good technology, or we stay open and then we have to argue about who's going to, who's going to get it, who's going to control it in the end, and hopefully everyone. But yeah, but I think we shouldn't forget the possibility that there's also the option that the technology won't exist because we put too many borders.
This is the very complex dilemma that we have to work with.
But can I respond to it? Sure. I think it's not right. It's indeed the assumption that if we can only have these technologies if we collaborate with everyone. You could also argue, well, it would be really great if each continent has an independent development of a quantum computer, because then we have 5 in 20 years' time and we can choose the best. There's also cases where actually secret development was more effective than public development. My country, Holland and Norway, secretly developed a nuclear reactor in the 1950s because it was not allowed by the Americans to do that, because they wanted to monopolize the knowledge at that time. Okay, so we can't do it. Secretly, Holland and Norway started to collaborate and did it also. So there you have an example where actually a small group, because it's secret, could do something big. I don't know how it works out with a quantum computer, but don't accept immediately that we can only.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So I'm going to read my notes because my English is not so good. So it's better for everyone. I'm a Marine Placa, PhD candidate in law, and I work on a regulation of AI and cybersecurity in public administration. So I'm not an expert at all in quantum technologies, but I'm very excited to discovering more dimension on this subject. And I think the global and interdisciplinary view is indispensable to build trust and safe ecosystem. So I'm very glad to explore it with you these days. I feel like a fear of missing out by human science on quantum subjects, and Mr. Vermaas said we have to shape a quantum for good with all ethics inside that we can imagine. So we need to be strong enough as scientific community, and we talk a lot about this discussion between us as a searcher. But I ask myself about the dialogue between us and the industry, and my question is, according to your respective experience, what is the place given to this consideration of governance, responsibility, and ethics by the big tech companies? Because so far they always act like we're too big to fail, and finally, social impact doesn't really matter. So I would like to know your opinion. The relation between policymaker and these companies is already unbalanced, or we still have a chance to effectively guide this early stage of development of quantum technology. Thank you, and sorry for my English.
I think we have, no, your English was amazing, don't worry. And I think we have 2 hours to answer this question, right, Amélie? Who wants to take this very easy question?
I can give a first shot. IBM had responsible research and innovation in their core, and a person known in the field, Mira Bouns-Wolf, she was the responsible research innovation person in IBM. What you can see is that some companies, also big tech companies, have embraced ethics quite seriously. See, okay, that gives us an edge. And the quantum industry community called TIQuA also has a much more active ethics chapter than the flagship. So really interesting. The industry is more for ELSA than academia. So yeah, it exists, and there are entry points. Of course, we also have these examples of companies who don't care at all. But yeah, it's not black and white. There are possibilities.
And maybe it's for in the rather stable 20th century, second half, etc., early this century, the kind of big tech being, or big companies in general, being not too openly political, are over to some extent. So I think we really must look at which companies we are talking about. So we have companies in the US which are clearly on the side of destruction of liberal democracy in the meantime. I don't know if I really would like to see certain companies. You can think, I don't need to mention one, but there are some which quite openly are not interested in not even in basic standards of liberal democracy. It's different in China, where the big tech companies are very closely connected to the state, the government, etc., and fulfill a role in a system. And even within the EU, there are huge differences. Like the German big companies are much more like this so-called old German model or something, like a big corporation altogether or something. I think in France it's perhaps a little bit similar. But so I think we really must look at what kind of companies we talk about, and the rest is, I would fully agree. So I've worked in my life a lot with companies who had very early on all kinds of responsible innovation activities, but we often also have companies that are totally disinterested. So, but it has become a kind of political dimension at the moment. What I would like to add, not for a discussion, because I know this would open another bottle, in particular coming from Germany, where the strong backbone are small and medium enterprises, and in particular small, medium enterprises that are then have some leadership role in the world market for one little product or something. So I often have the impression that we already from a government perspective and a societal perspective, already look way too much at the big companies, which are often just taking a lot of public money, are not very efficient, are very bureaucratic. And so I would be much more interested in how can we support small and medium enterprises. And within that, not only this kind of fetishization of startups, startups are wonderful, but in particular the existing medium enterprises, what kind of use can they make of new technologies? So.
Yeah, and maybe for that, using the Canadian example and quoting industry leaders, for example, to go back also to Pieter's comment about like, the strategic autonomy of the countries and investing in the countries, like government are like tabling billions of investment. And for example, like in Canada, a lot of people in industry think it would be good for Canadian taxpayers to fund Canadian startups and not American big companies who already have like enough money. So that's part of, I think, also some of the kind of conversion we need to have at the moment. Do we have time for maybe one last question? Yes, Karl? Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you. You talked a lot about interdisciplinarity, and Pieter, at one point you mentioned that quantum technologies is just another technology. So my question would be like twofold. So are there really no differences between quantum and other technologies from the point of view of ethics and law, and like other than cybersecurity? Is there no difference, or should we just see it as another technology? And the other point is, should we also involve other technologies who might have gone through these things before in the discussions that we are having together, and add that to the interdisciplinarity part?
Okay, I think the second part is yours. The first part is, yeah, of course there are lots of differences between quantum. One of the big differences between quantum and nano was that quantum is dominated by one discipline, quantum mechanics. Nano wasn't. Quantum was always really interesting in the mind of the general public. So if you say quantum, then everyone says, "Ooh, that's." Of course, that's really interesting. But I don't think it's meaningful to emphasize that to do ethics of quantum technology or law of quantum. It actually derails it. It puts the attention on something which is not so relevant. The relevance is more the geopolitical use, this notion of the use of states, these other goals of the race. And in UNESCO they didn't talk about the esoterics of quantum. It's just business. But let's say the lessons of other technologies.
You already responded to some extent. Yeah, it's okay. It's always nice to have also controversial standpoints. So I agree with you, but on a very instrumental level, also in order to get funding for doing our kind of research. We won't get it all with the geopolitics, etc. So it is always will be the interest to have a kind of science communication, and in traditional natural science, and in particular policymaker circles, there is this old model of science communication. We teach, and the public will be enlightened and be happy or something. And for this purpose, we need interesting topics, and we have quantum mysticism as a fascination in the public. And I just give you very shortly one example. In Heidelberg, it's a city, old university town, in the city of Bildungsbürgertum, educated classes, but very special. So highly educated people, but usually in the classics and humanities, social sciences. And they had a discussion of a quantum physicist, a science journalist with a background there, and a psychologist who presented a kind of quantum psychology. So, and they thought this is really bogus, bullshit science or something. And then there was a huge discussion, and I think it would have been much more intelligent to have for such a group of people, someone maybe from the work package 3, or what was it, like real decent philosophy of physics, which we have. And so I think this is still something we can do. And Otherwise, I agree, and otherwise I would say that many of the quantum technologies developments, there's a lot of things that are special and different, for example, nanotechnology, etc., but there are certain mechanisms who you will see again and again, and certain methodological questions, when do you bring in what kind of people at what time. And as I understand it, too, a lot of quantum tech will have an enabling function, and therefore to somehow also inherits a lot of question of others. But you can, or do you disagree?
Yes, I also disagree.
With me or with him?
With both. Yes, so on one hand, quantum has nothing unique in itself. So what is specific of this branch of research, what is typical of other branches as well, is really that from the point of view of research is at the edge of the knowledge, so it requires very specific methods and techniques, so sort of deep tech. So you cannot just have your quantum computer by buying on the internet a few cables and connecting them. In this sense, it's like a high-level technology, but there is nothing unique in the quantum, and this aura of something special, I don't think we should use it by no means. So this is my opinion.
Okay.
Okay. You want?
But what you are doing with the people who are seeing like in Heidelberg, you have more these kind of posters, and also in Karlsruhe for science evenings than for club nights. And when there's quantum, there comes a group of people who knows quantum. I heard about this in school, and then they come. What are you doing with these people? Tell them, you can go. We don't need you.
No, I think we should communicate more and more and educate the people and teach them what is really quantum science, quantum physics, and then I think will be a gain for everybody. But I agree that there is a knowledge barrier because you need some math, a little bit, some abstract concepts, but we are working on trying to explain quantum sciences in the most possible simple way, but correct. So this is one of our ambitions of these educational programs in France, for example, but I'm sure in all the countries. So I would say that each of us should be engaged to go in the street and explain what is really quantum physics, and there is no quantum astrology or whatever.
Okay, thank you so much, and I will just kind of, as a wrap up, like just one last comment about this. To answer your question, without answering your question, be it like the same or different, we just need to learn from like, the pitfalls of everything that happens before in the history of humanity with technology, either when we were like afraid of a technology or we thought that it was magic. Both ways it didn't work, or sometimes we arrive like way too late, like, for AI. And like kind of AI now, you could decide to ban something. For a lot of like the quantum innovation technologies, when they're gonna be like on the market, is gonna be way more complex than just to, ban a specific use. So that's why we need to like, think about this now, even though it might be like, well, there is already some innovation, in the market, but like it might be more like in 5 years, 15 years, 20 years. But when it will be there, it will be like way too late this time. So that's why also for the education, because today there is so much like BS, excuse me, we will cut this, about like AI, like the mystic of AI is magic, because there is a lack of literacy in the public. So let's try to avoid this with quantum, even though we know that especially in France, with a specific cream, it happened last year with the quantum Guerlain, I think it was Guerlain, cream. So it's already like starting, to have like the quantum BS. So we need to be sure. Yeah, no, Virginia Doria, who released the quantum Côte d'Azur, Quant Azure, was really like shocked about this and cannot stop talking about this. But yeah, so on this note, we're gonna stop here. Thank you so much for my panelists for joining us this afternoon for this super stimulating conversation, at least in my opinion. Thank you so much for the audience, and let's applaud our speakers.